Alright, welcome back to the PyBrain channel. So in the last video we talked about how to classify the different types of data that we will deal with in Python. So that included strings such as words that are or alphanumerical characters that are enclosed in either single or double parentheses. Quotes. And also we looked at integers, which are just whole numbers, and there's also floats, which are the decimal. And so another thing we could also look at is the next step would be to look at Python, how to actually make a program in Python. So the actual way to do that is, so if you're in Linux, you would have this terminal that you could access. Also, if you're in Mac, you could access a terminal as well. If you're in Windows, you're going to have to use a IDE. You could use PyCharm, which is pretty user-friendly and has a nice layout. And so I'll show here for Linux by creating a Python file on the command line. You would type in a editor. So in Linux, there's this program editor is called Nano, or GNU Nano to be more exact. And so you would type that plus the file name. So the file name, let's call it example.py. So Python files always have to have the .py. Pressing enter, we're entering now the GNU Nano editor. So in here we have this layout shown here, where we have the file name shown here at the top. Here it's telling us that this is a GNU Nano 2.5.3. Down here you can see some options. Okay, so in a Python program, you would start off by importing any libraries if you need any special built-in functions. You could also define any variables. And then also we're going to look at how the data will flow through the program. So let's make a simple program that prints out hello world, which is the first program that a lot of people will deal with. And so we could see here on the editor. So we'll type in, we'll say my string, so that's the variable name, and we'll say that that's equal to hello world with an exclamation point. Notice it's highlighted in green, so that indicates that it's a string. So now that we have my string, we could print it using this print function. That's a built-in Python function. And since we're using Python 3.0, we're going to have to enclose the variable in parentheses. So once you have this written out, pressing Ctrl O, and then enter, and then Ctrl X. So now we're back at the command line terminal. And so we run this file using the command python and example.py. So you can see the output just shows up here on the console. Hello world. So if we go back, so I'm just pressing the upward arrow key to go back to previous line. So here we go back to the file name. We open it with Nano. And so let's say that instead of printing the whole string. I want to print line by line, um, each line containing one letter from the string. And so that's where we'll accomplish this using a for loop, which in Python is just started with this keyword for. And so we could say for letter in my string, and then a colon, enter, and then tab. So in here we'll say print letter, Control O. And so what I want to do here is just go over so what this is doing. So first we have my string, which is what we defined previously. And so now what this is a new construct that we haven't gone over. And so this is called a for loop. So the keyword for tells us that we're going to be looping for a predefined number of times. In this case, we're looping through this string that we defined. So we're looping through each item here, which would be actually every letter, and even the empty space would be classified as a component of this. So we're saying for every letter in my string, we're going to print letter. So let's run this and see what we get. So I'm going to press Control X. And back here in the terminal, Python example.py. So now notice the output. We have hello world exclamation point with the empty space in between. And so just as we expect, every line has one letter or empty space or symbol from the string. So for loops are very useful for iterating over certain objects. String is one of them. You could also loop through a list, a dictionary, a tuple, which is some variation of a list. There's also arrays, but those are more technical, mostly used in the scientific field using the NumPy library, which we won't go into that anytime soon. But let's say I had a list. So I'm just going to comment that out with a hash. So in Python, comments are written with a hash at the start of the line. So if you want to make a comment in Python, you could put a hash and then write any sort of comment that you could, just like you would in a text document or a word processor, because after the hash, the computer does not read it. So I'll put here, this is a for loop. So this would be my comment, and I would be letting everyone who reads this code know what precedes this comment. Okay, so I commented this line out, and I have the for loop still running. So in order to avoid errors, I'm going to comment that out as well. And then we want to run a list, right? So we have to come up with a variable name for for this list that we're going to create. I'll call it, so I'll just call it my list. I'll set that equal to, so lists always have a bracket, square brackets. And inside the list, you could put any sequence of data types. So you could have strings, you could have floats and integers, even booleans. So let's just put each type of data there. So let's say our first item is, well, actually, I could just include my string there since it's already a string that we created. So we'll just put my string is the first item in my list. The second item would be an integer. Let's put let's just say 3. Then a float, which would be a decimal number. So let's put 3.14 for, which is a short version of the number pi. So then this is a string. We have an integer. We have a float, which is a decimal. We also have booleans. So that'd be true or false. Here I'll put true. And then we also have list is also its own data type. So here I'll create an empty, I'll create a list and I'll just put a 0 inside of it. Okay, so now we got a list. Take note that they always start with brackets that are square brackets, and they also end with square brackets. And all the items inside the list are separated with commas. So now that we have my list defined, we could loop through every item in the list with a for loop. So you could say for item in my list, enter, and then tab. We'll say print type item. Make sure your parentheses are closing. So here I have 2 closing parentheses, because over here I have one opening and another opening. So one common mistake a lot of people make, especially in beginning for programming in Python, is they don't have the proper number of closed opening and closing parentheses. So make sure you just keep that in mind. Okay, so what are we doing here? So we're looping through every item here in my list, and we're saying for every item we're going to print this function here, which is type parentheses item. So type is a built-in function in Python as well, and what it does is it just prints out the class of that item or of any kind of object that you put inside those parentheses in here. So let's think about this and say for the first item that'll be passed through the loop. So we're saying for my string, or I'm sorry, for my, so we're looping through my list, right? So the first item is going to be my string. String up here is defined as hello world, and it's a string because it has quotes. So we're going to print the type of my string, which will be a string. So the output should be class string, or abbreviated str in Python. For the next one, which would be a 3, the type of this should be an integer, which would be abbreviated int. This is a float. This is a boolean, or I believe in Python it's abbreviated just BOOL. And then this right here should be a list. So let's go ahead and save this with Control O and then Control X. And I'll just press the upward arrow so I could get this line here that says Python and then example .py. Pressing enter. Now we can see that for my string it printed out a class str. For the integer, the class is int. For the float, which is a decimal number, we have the float class. The boolean has a bool or bool. And finally, the list is a list. Okay, so going back to the editor. Yeah, so basically one of the nice things that Python has is these built-in iteration functions. So here's the for loop. And then of course I introduced in this video to the this class of lists and the for loop function, which is able to go item by item through an iterable object. And so that would include a string, such as shown here in this example where we printed each letter in the string, and also in this example here where we actually combined the introduction of a list as a collection of objects separated by commas and enclosed by square brackets, and also this for loop, which was printing out the data type of each of these items. Alright, so I hope you guys learned something new and are able to make more sense of this. So in the next video, we're going to learn about another type of iteration construct in Python called the while loop. And also we'll be able to learn the mechanics of that. Alright, so thank you guys for watching the video. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel so I could keep making more videos and know that this content is helping people. Right, well with that, thank you everyone, and I'll see you next time.